Okay, yesterday our lesson was all about modeling with division, and we looked at money and how to model a division problem with money. Today we're going to actually get into the division algorithm. So if you could open up your math notebooks to the numbers and operations section, go ahead and put today's date and dividing by one-digit divisors at the top of your next blank page. We are going to be going through the steps of the long division process and talking about some strategies when you are doing long division. I'm going to show you several examples and then have you try some on your own. So when you have a division problem like 289 divided by 3, the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure you estimate. You want to estimate so that you know about what your answer should be. Looking at this problem, I can choose two ways to estimate. I could round or I could use compatible numbers. In this case, I'm going to round. I'm going to change 289 up to 300. So I'm going to round up and then divide that by 3. And I know that I get 100. So my answer should be close to 100. And I know that this is going to be an overestimate because I have rounded 289 up to 300. So my answer should actually be less than 100. And it's good to know that going in. The next thing I'm going to think about is you just heard a song by a math teacher where he laid out the steps of long division in a creative way. So if you would take a moment, if you need to pause this video, to write down these steps: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, divide, multiply, subtract, compare, bring down. He did not have this step of compare, and I'm going to show you what I mean by that here in just a minute. So please jot those down, and then we'll jump into our problem. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my divisor, and the first thing I'm going to ask myself is, how many times can I take 2 divided by 3? How many times can 3 go into 2? And the answer is, well, it can't go in any times because 3 is actually larger than 2. So I can put a 0 here to show that, well, it goes into 2 0 times. And when I do that, I'm going to then look at, instead of just 2, I'm going to look at 28. So I can ask myself, how many times does 3 go into 28? Or I can say, what is 28 divided by 3? And I know that, well, 3 times 9 is 27. So I'm going to put a 9 up here. And now I've completed the divide step. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply. And I like to put a multiplication sign right here in the corner. So I'm going to take 9 times 3, and I get 27. And so I'm going to write that right below where 28 is. And if you can be doing this problem along with me in your math notebook, that would be wonderful. So I have divided, I have multiplied. The next thing I need to do is subtract. So I'm going to subtract these two numbers. 28 minus 27 is 1. And so far I've done nothing with this 9 right here. I've kind of just ignored it and pretended like it wasn't there. When you get your answer to your subtraction problem, notice I added this step called compare. I want to compare the number that I got, the difference, with my divisor. So I'm going to look at 1 and 3. I want my difference to be less than my divisor. If it is greater than my divisor, like let's say my answer here was 4, I would know I've done something wrong and I would need to go back up and change this number. But because 1 is less than 3, that tells me that I can go on through the steps of long division. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down this 9 here. And I'm just going to rewrite it down here. So now instead of 9, I actually have 19. After you bring down, then you go back to the top and you start the whole process over again. So I'm going to divide 19 divided by 3. And I know that, well, 3 times 6 is 18, and that's very close. And I'm going to multiply 6 times 3, and I get 18, and I'm going to record that down here underneath the 19. Then I'm going to subtract 9 minus 8 is 1. I'm going to compare Is 1 less than 3? And my answer is yes. So that tells me I can go on. Now, I get to the bring down step, and there's nothing left for me to bring down. So what that tells me is my problem is actually complete, but I have a remainder. So to record this remainder, I'm going to put an R up here. R for remainder makes sense. And I'm going to write 1. So now my quotient is actually 96 remainder 1. Notice right here I put that you need to check your answer. When you are dividing, it is so important that you check your answer. So to check, I'm going to take 96 times 3. You can always check your division problem with multiplication. 6 times 3 is 18. 3 times 9 is 27, plus 1 is 28. And I have 288, but I have to add this remainder here, since it was what was left over, and I get 289. So that tells me that my work was correct. It's also good to go back and think about your estimate. Remember, we estimated our answer would be about 100. 96 remainder 1 is very close to that. So that means that I've done something right. Okay, let's try it with another problem. If your new problem is 380 divided by 6, the very first thing you're going to want to do is to make an estimate so that you know about what your quotient should be. In this case, I would take 380, and I might think of compatible numbers here and say, well, I know 36 divided by 6 is a basic fact. So I'm going to change 380 to 360 and then divide that by 6, because that's easy for me to do in my head. And when I do 360 divided by 6, I get about 60. So I'm going to write that over here. That tells me my answer should be about 60. However, I do know that this is an underestimate since I changed it to 360 and it used to be 380. So my actual answer should be more than 60. Now I can jump into the steps in long division. So because my very first thing I'm going to be thinking is divide, I know that I cannot do 3 divided by 6 because 6, my divisor, is greater than 3. So on the last problem, I put a 0 up here. What this tells me is that my answer is actually going to start above the tens place. So I'm going to be asking myself, what is 38 divided by 6? And I know that 38 divided by 6 is about 6. So I divided. The next thing to do is to multiply. So I'm going to take 6 times 6, and I'm going to record my answer right here underneath the 38. 6 times 6 is 36. My third step is to subtract. So when I subtract those two, I do 8 minus 6, and I get 2. 3 minus 3 is 0. Okay. The fourth step in that added step is to compare. So I should be asking myself, is 2 greater than or less than 6? And because it's less than 6, I know that I have done my work right. If it were greater than 6, I would need to go back and figure out what I did wrong. The last step is to bring down. So when I bring this down, I am now working with the number 20. When I get down to here, I go back up to the top and I go through all these steps again. So 20 divided by 6 is about 3. 6 times 3 is 18. Then I subtract. 20 minus 18, I know it's 2, but I'm going to show it here. I'd have to borrow. 10 minus 8 is 2. Compare, 2 is less than 6, so I'm good to go. Now when I get to the bring down, if there's nothing left to bring down, I know that 2 is my remainder. So I record that by writing an R, capital R, and the number 2. So my answer is 60, my quotient is 63 remainder 2. It's close to 60, so that tells me that I probably did my work right. The last thing I need to do, and the most important, is check. So if I take 63 times 6. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 6 is 36 plus 1, so 37. Then I need to add my remainder. That's key to remember. You always add your remainder. So you multiply these, add your remainder when you're checking. And your final answer, 380. Since these two numbers are the same, that tells me that 63 remainder 2 is the correct quotient. Let's practice one more together. All right, so the first thing I'm going to want to do is estimate. What I would like for you to do right now is stop the video, and I want you to try to estimate what you think the quotient should be. All right, so if you practiced, here's what I would have done. I would have found two numbers that were compatible. So because 54 divided by 4 is not a basic fact, I can't really just make this 540. I chose to make it 550 and then divide by 5. So when I do 550 divided by 5, I cover up this 0. And 55 divided by 5 is 11. And then I add my 0 back on. So my estimate was 110. You may have done it differently, and that's okay. Estimations may turn out differently based on how the person changes the numbers. Okay, go ahead and stop the video, and I want you to try to solve this problem on your own. And then I will complete the problem and show you what I got, and you can check your answer. Okay, so when I divided 547 divided by 4, my answer that I got was 136, remainder 3. This one was a little different. If you asked yourself, how many times can 4 go into 5, you can actually do that division problem, and you know that it only goes into 5 one time. So your answer started in the hundreds place, whereas in our other two problems, your answer started in the tens place. I went through these steps, and I actually had to go through them an extra time because I had two numbers that had to be brought down. One thing I forgot to say earlier is that your remainder should always be less than your divisor. If your remainder is greater than your divisor, then you know you've done something wrong. When you check this answer, I'm going to take 136, oops. I'm going to take 136 times 4. And I get 544 when I add 3, 547, and that tells me that my answer is correct. Remember that you can go back, re-watch any of these. You can go back and listen to the song again, but I'd like for you to try these 3 practice problems on your own, and we will check them tomorrow in class, and we will be doing more review and practice with the steps in long division.